Kia ora, bros and girls, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do the completion guide for Ultron's Assault, which is Variant 1, Chapter 2. Okay, and we're going to talk a little bit about the best champions to use. We're going to talk a little bit about the lines and stuff like that. So, what I'm going to say, here, I think if we start with the teams and then we go through the lines, it's probably going to make the most sense. And I'm going to say there's probably about 3 champs that are really useful for this that I build my team around, and then there's 3 kind of boss counters, 3 or 4 boss counters that are really good for the bosses, right? So your whole play is going to be based around, and of course there's some champs that I don't have, and if I did have, they would definitely be on this list. People like Dr. Doom, who I think would be an absolute beast for this quest, but I don't have him in any star rating. With a bit of luck, I'll pull him as a 3-star at some point soon, and at least get to play around with him. But yeah, I think Doom would be probably in addition to this list if I had him, but I don't. So instead, the ones I've used have been Warlock, and I think Warlock is absolutely fantastic for this, particularly for completion, but also even into exploration. But Warlock has got so much good power control. He's got, those heavy on those bleeds are really strong, and he just synergizes really well with magic. So there's this synergy, particularly with magic, where her attack is increased by 50% while in limbo, and he generates minus 70% less power than opponents. Now, I'm not entirely sure if that means they only get 30% of the power, or it drains 70%. But you know what? With Warlock, it seems like you can go through the entire fight and never even have to worry about their SP3 if you play him pretty well. You play him correctly. So yeah, that's kind of the main synergy that I used. Of course, magic is for me the cream of the crop for this particular quest. I say that with an asterisk because I haven't tried Dr. Doom in this quest, and I think he might be the absolute MVP for this quest, but I don't have him, so I can't say he was my MVP for this quest. But Magic definitely was. She did a lot of work, a lot of power control. She controlled lanes. She took down bosses. She was fantastic, right? So with Magic and Warlock, that's kind of how I worked my team. You can put Vision in there as well if you really want to. That's kind of my team that kind of cleared lane. Sometimes I'd have a Vision, sometimes I'd have Star-Lord, sometimes I'd have Starkey. But it was mainly about Warlock and Magic doing most of the lane clearing. Okay. Now, other ones that do get a good mention for completion. Actually, I'm not going to discuss the exploration ones. I'm just going to talk about completion. The ones that have a special mention for completion are Magic, because Magic you will need for the level 1 boss for the first map. The second one is actually Dormammu. Dormammu is incredible for the second boss. And you might not realize people won't realize how strong he is, but he is so good for the second boss. And then finally Nebula, and Nebula is a bit of a revelation. I honestly, sorry, I actually have her as a 6-star as well. Nebula was an absolute beast for the final boss, and she's one of the best, safest and cheapest alternatives to be able to complete this quest. So if you have that team, Warlock, Magic, Nebula, Dormammu, and you can slot anybody into that final slot: Starkey, Doc Ock, Star-Lord, Guillotine 2099, or whoever you want, Dr. Doom, whoever you want. But those 4 are kind of I don't want to say the horsemen of this quest, but yeah, they're the horsemen, women, demons of this particular quest. So let's jump into the first map and let's have a little bit of a look. And so the first map, the global node here is Spite. I always go to the wrong button. So the global node is spiked, right? And the path that most people are probably going to find easiest um, is going right up that left side with the increased power gain, right? Because so long as you have a good power control champ, that side's not too hard. The alternative, depending on how well you're feeling and how well you're feeling with fisticuffs, is you could potentially go up this path through the crit dult. Actually, a couple of these paths are pretty easy, but so depending on who you prefer to fight, Thor Ragnarok is a bit of a pain in the ass with the increased power gain, but once you start getting the power control, that's pretty easy. Then Green Goblin's a pretty straightforward and easy fight. Rhino is pretty easy, just keep them in the corner, keep him power locked. Heimdall, don't push him past the SP1 into SP2 and just keep him locked. He doesn't have any natural power gain. Rhino doesn't have a natural power gain. Green Goblin doesn't have a natural power gain. Juggernaut doesn't have a natural power gain, and you can just keep him power locked. And then you go to the Mystic Drone, which, if I remember correctly, the Mystic Drone is actually Iron Man, and then the Mutant Drone is, I want to say, Electro at this point in time. I'm pretty sure the tech is Black Panther. I think Mutant is Electro. Yep. And then another. Definitely Iron Man for the boss drone for the Mystic. So that's one path you can go. The other path is down through King Groot. Maybe if you have like a Doctor Voodoo as your fifth, he'll make quick work of Groot, or does magic. But then you've got to fight against Miles Morales, which could be a little bit difficult. And then you can probably go up this path of Cap. Void can be a little bit annoying, but you can take care of him. Magneto's a pretty easy fight as well. And then you've got the Cosmic Champ, which is Magneto. And then you've got, again, an Electro Drone without an SP3, and a Mystic Drone, which is Iron Man without an SP3. So those two paths are probably the easiest. I think my preference was to go the power gain one, because once you're past that first fight with Thor Ragnarok and you've got him power controlled, that's the really annoying one where his power can get out of hand. But once you've got him down and he's quite, it's pretty easy to practice on him and get him right after a couple of tries, then the rest are pretty easy. Like I say, none of them have any natural power gain, so it's a pretty straightforward path. And then you get to the final boss, and you're met with the attack and health. I mean, that's pretty normal. The SP2 being unblockable, it's not really a big deal, because Iron Man's SP2 is not that hard to evade. The one that's going to get you is this Backlash Pulse, which might seem quite benign to begin with. But if you have a look at it, whenever a buff would be triggered by the attacker, they suffer 25% of the defender's attack and damage and are drained of 25% of their max power. What this means is that if you dex, and obviously it's quite easy to dex the SP1, the SP2, if you dex the SP1, you're going to take damage. Not only are you going to take damage, you're going to lose power as well, which really, really hurts you. So the best way to play around this guy is to bring in, or the best way I've found, is to bring in magic. What I did with magic is, rather than evading or dexing the SP1 or the SP2, this guy doesn't do a lot of damage, is I would just take it on the chin. I would just block the SP1. I would never look back, never dash back, never retreat. Just block through the specials until you get to your SP2. Then once you're in your SP2 and once you've got him power locked and once you've got him shut down, you can just use the backdraft intercept method, which is medium, light, and then you stop just before the fifth. You dash back, and then you dash forward again with the medium and restart that combo. Sometimes he comes along for the ride, and you can just keep cycling that. Sometimes you can't. I'm going to put a video up of one-shotting this guy with magic, and you'll be able to see how it did. Sometimes he cooperates, sometimes he doesn't, but the main key here is to not try to evade or dex against this guy. If you must, block the special. If you need to back away for some reason, parry him, and like if you need to create space, parry him, and then move backwards. And some people have found the easiest way as well is to just completely take out the dex mastery, which will help, because then without the dex mastery, magic really doesn't really have any buffs. So you can kind of play around that, and then he's pretty straightforward. So I'll put a video of one-shotting this guy up and how to go around it. But so that chapter is, it's a shock to the system, because you're coming from no power gain to incredible power gain, but with a lot of mystic dispersion, the right kind of baiting to begin with Thor Ragnarok. Once you get that SP2 for magic on the go, then you're kind of laughing, and I would assume Doctor Doom would be the same. So that's quest 1, and quest 1, like I say, it's a shock to the system, but once you get around it, it's not too bad. And then we go into quest 2, and quest 2 is a little bit more difficult, particularly because the global node for this one is actually cornered. So they don't have that increased power gain, but when you get them into the corner, and if you're using damage over time, but we're not really using damage over time here, but you can with Warlock, because you've got that shock, you've got that bleed. As soon as they've got something like that on them, they're going to take a tremendous amount of power. But we're all about power control, so I think this is actually probably easier lines than the increased power gain. And I'm going to say the stun immune path is not the one you want to go towards. I think the easiest path is you go to Heimdall, and they've got masochism, so you just got to remember that your first parry is gone and it regens them. This is why Warlock is pretty good for this path, because after a while it doesn't matter if it regens them or not, because they're not going to actually regen, so you're just missing the parry. But you can also use magic for this one. So you go to Heimdall, evade the SP1, and finish off the fight, or just power lock him, keep him power locked in the corner. Symbiote Supreme is a little bit annoying, but again, magic can keep him power controlled drastically as well, because he's so slow at gaining those first 2 bars of power that you're gonna beat him off the mark. And once you're at your SP2, he's never going to gain power. He's never going to get into evolution mode. And then King Groot's the same kind of thing. You just maybe will have to work around his SP1 rather than the SP2. And then you can just SP2 him to the days. And then if you don't want to fight MODOK, you can go to Kingpin. Kingpin's a little bit more difficult because of that whole rage thing, and he shakes off debuffs quite quickly. So you might just have to be a little bit careful, maybe baiting out the SP1, or if you can, the backdraft intercept method. And then you got another King Groot, which is pretty easy. You power lock him or evade the SP1, and that's not too bad. Hood, same kind of thing, evade the SP1 with magic, he's not too bad. Then you've got an Iron Man on the masochism node, an Iron Man drone, which is really not that bad. Then you've got a Cyclops drone, which does a little bit of damage. It's got that enhanced crit, but again, so if you've passed a previous chapter, you've probably learned how to evade Cyclops' SP1 and SP2. So that's a good way to get past those first couple of specials. And then once you're ramped up with magic, you can just keep him power locked, and he's not really a big deal. And then you come to the boss. And this is the reverse of the last chapter, where the last chapter, the line was the main event, and the boss was kind of just like a nicety, like a rite of passage. This one, the lines are actually pretty easy, but the boss, if you don't have the right counter, is a nightmare. right? And here's where, here's why, okay? So the boss has Toxic Splash and Nanoplague, right? And he's got Breakthrough and he's got Cornered. Now you don't have to worry about Cornered too much because he's only got 2 bars of power. He never will throw an SP3, so you don't need to worry about that. Breakthrough is kind of good because it means that if you last long enough into the fight, you're going to be doing a ton of damage later on. But it's about lasting into that fight. And that's where the struggle comes in, because you've got Nanoplague and you've got Toxic Splash. And what happens is, this guy, when you attack into him, he's got a chance to give you, he's got a chance to poison you, basically. And you can get poisoned multiple times. Now, getting poisoned once is okay. Getting poisoned more than once is not okay, because you're not going to be able to regain it with willpower, right? So that's one thing. The poison damage itself is not too much of a problem, particularly if you only have 1 poison charge on you. That's fine. You can use willpower to get past that. The annoying thing here is the Toxic Splash. So when you have a poison, if he throws a special, you take 65% of his attack as direct damage. And this means he gets 2 poisons on you. That's it. You're done. You're in the bin. Right? So one thing you want to do is you don't want him to be throwing specials when you've got poison. And ideally, you don't want to have poison because you're poison immune. And so you might go, well, don't dream, but can't I just bring a robot? I've got Warlock, he's poison immune. I've got Vision, he's poison immune. I've got Guillotine 2099, they're poison immune. But the reality is, where you have a robotic attacker, if you don't gain a poison, you get a shock, which is actually even worse, right? Because the shock does 85% of his attack as direct damage, and you die even quicker. So you want to, if you try to bring Nebula in here to shut him down, she's going to die hitting into him. Warlock's going to be the same. Nebula, actually, maybe not. Maybe Nebula will be able to shut down this ability. If you don't attack first, if you just hang out, get her 5 electrostatic charges, and then start attacking. But it's still going to be a bit of a long fight. Warlock is going to die to the shock. Ultron, Vision, Guillotine 2099. So there's only really 2 options here that I've been able to one-shot this guy with. And one of them is magic, but magic requires a little bit of tact and a little bit of strategy. And the other is Dormammu. And let's talk a little bit about both. So to begin with magic, and again, I'll upload these videos, so you'll actually be able to go and see these fights that I'm talking about and see what I mean. So with magic, like I said, you don't want to have more than 1 poison charge on you, because your willpower is not going to regain more than that. If you have 1, you're only losing like 1 HP per tick, or 2 HP per second, which is fine. You can last the entire fight taking that kind of damage. The key thing is, when you've got the poison, make sure that he doesn't get the he's not in special throwing range, and this might require a little bit of smart play early on, where you have to stop just before he gets the SP1, particularly if you have a poison on you, where you try to use the Pacify Mastery to stun him just before he's about to fill 1 bar power, and then hit while he's stunned to get him into the first bar, so that you reduce the chance of you getting a poison on you, and that way you don't get that Toxic Splash damage. But then ultimately, once you've been able to work your way to the SP2, you can just kind of power lock this guy and use your backdraft intercepts. And if he doesn't have power, if he doesn't have an SP1, and you only have 1 poison on you, then the rest of that fight is manageable, right? Because the poison's not going to kill you, and if he can't throw a special, he can't explode the poison on you, that's not going to kill you. And then the longer you stay in the fight, the more combo you have, the more damage you're going to be doing, particularly with that breakthrough. The second option is to bring in Dormammu. Now Dormammu is poison immune, so actually he doesn't really care. Now, the only thing with my Dormammu fight is because he's R3, he doesn't have a lot of life. I don't particularly want to be blocking. I don't particularly want to be blocking damage. I didn't feel very confident evading the SP1 with Dormammu consistently. So what I did was I was very safe, and I started just using medium light medium or medium combos to keep him under the SP1 for a long time, and I would use my SP2 to kind of power lock him, and then the longer you stayed in the fight, he didn't throw any specials, he didn't take any poison, you didn't have to evade specials, and the further down you go into the fight, the more damage he did, and he was able to easily one-shot him a couple of times. So that's the way if you want to go without any units and without revives. Those two guys are going to do wonders for you on this particular quest. So then we're left with one final map, and maybe the most annoying of the bosses actually. So this map, the global node, I can't remember what the global node is on this. I think it is. It's increased power gain, actually, right? So the whole chapter is about power gain. And now, the easiest path is definitely not this Electro-Korg Wasp path. I can guarantee that. That's the last path you want to do. And it's not this Mordo Iron Man path either. Probably the easiest one is going to be the breakthrough path. So you go to Hood, same as before. Longer you stay in the fight, more damage you're going to do. Just evade the SP1, build up your combo. Deadpool, if you have power control, you don't have to worry about him at 30%. And even if you don't, if you have a wall lock, he's going to heal block him. Then Hyperion is going to be a little bit of a tricky fight. But again, if you have a Dormammu, if you have magic, if you have wall lock, you're not going to worry about this one too much. And the longer you stay in the fight, the quicker you finish him off. Wall lock will take care of Omega as well. You evade the SP1, build up your combo. Then you've got Electro. With Electro, do be careful, right, with the mutant nodes, because I think I mentioned this before, but the SP1, you have to be really far away to evade it, right? It's not just a matter of dashing back at the right time. It's a matter of having space between you and that SP1 so it doesn't actually hit you, because it I think the area of effect is kind of like 2/3 of the screen, right? So you have to be really far back. The SP2 just be a little bit can be a little bit tricky as well. Be careful, because when he throws the shock down, that shock can travel, and if you're close, the time he hits the ground and the time you move back is almost the same. But if you're a little bit further, the time he hits the ground is not necessarily the time you have to evade. You kind of have to follow the shock, and when it almost is at your feet, that's when you got to dash back. So this guy can be a little bit tricky, but with a bit of practice, he's not too bad. And then you've got a science drone, which is just vision. He's pretty easy. He's pretty easy to evade, so I'm not going to worry about that. And then you got a Black Panther, which is again very easy. So this is a very easy path to completion. But then you have maybe one of the, if not the nastiest boss. He's definitely top 3 of the variants. One of the top 3 nastiest bosses in the variants. And this guy's a science drone, so he is actually just vision. But increased power gain doesn't matter, because he's only got 2 SPs. The annoying thing about this guy is 2 things. First of all, he evades. Second of all, each time he passively evades, he puts a fatigue debuff on you, which reduces your crit rating by 1,000 for 15 seconds. And you go, oh, okay, that's not so bad. But while you're under the effect, you're also gassed. So while you're under the effect of that fatigue debuff, 10% of your power is drained every second, and every time you attack into the defender, you take 25% of his attack as damage. So what this means is, and you might be able to watch Seaton's video of his run to see how he handled this. But what that means is basically, you start attacking into this guy, and it's RNG, and he evades. And as soon as he evades, and he can evade mid-combo, and mid combo, your medium light, he evades the light. You've already done the light, and that could kill you, right? If you've missed the second of the 4 combo or the 5 combo, you're already dead because you've already put in three attacks, and that's 75% of the damage, and that's it. You're gone. Right. So a lot of people have used the parry 3 method. Some people use parry heavy against him, but he does do a lot of damage. So, and also the fact that he evades as well is really annoying. So the best method I found for this guy is to use Nebula. And with Nebula, you're going to spend the first little bit of your fight just building electrostatic charges. Now when you're at 5, but actually for this one, I think when you're at 6, when you're at 5, it shuts down completely any robot's ability, any drone's ability. So what happens is when you spend your first few seconds of the fight building 5-6 electrostatic charges on Nebula, Spry and Ghast become non-existent, right? So long as you have those electrostatic charges and you don't parry accidentally and lose them. So once you've got that, then you can continue building that, and you can continue just looking for openings and damaging this guy. And it's just about staying into the fight, staying long in the fight, and just doing damage. Unfortunately, it's a much longer fight than the last couple of bosses. You don't have breakthrough here to help you on this one. Nebula doesn't do a heck of a lot of damage. You can't use the whole parry and SP2 because while that would do a lot of damage, then you would lose the entire ability accuracy reduction, and he would start being able to evade. Also, you don't have great block damage as Nebula, so you can't take too many hits. So the whole kind of fight is all about just keeping those, not parrying accidentally and losing the electrostatic charges, and looking for openings. That is evading the SP1 and getting back in there, evading the SP2, getting back in there, baiting out the heavy and getting back in there. But if you can keep that up, even though it's a long fight and it might be 220 hits on like a 6-star Nebula, you're able to one-shot this guy. She's the only champion I know that can one-shot this drone. You could say Medusa might also be able to, and maybe there have been people there with a stacked Dusa, but actually no, you can't use Dusa in this quest because it's Mystic and Tech only. So Nebula is the only person I know I can think of. I can go through the list. Nobody else is going to be able to one-shot this guy. Now, Doc Ock with some good RNG can parry heavy this guy. Starkey can parry heavy. Star-Lord can parry heavy. And you're a little bit more reliant on RNG. You will get them in a few revives. But if you want to one-shot this guy and not spend any units, Nebula is definitely the way to go. And then that's that. So once you've done that, boys and girls, then that's chapter 2 completed. The most difficult chapter of any of the variants, actually. I spent so many resources on this chapter, and wait till you get the exploration guide. It's going to be nasty. But I'm going to be putting videos up of every single boss fight on both chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3 when it's uploaded. So hopefully this helped you out, guys, and do subscribe, do keep following the channel, and do share it with your alliance and your friends. Hopefully they can find it helpful as well. And yeah, let me know if there's anything else that you'd like to know, or any feedback. So we'll see you tomorrow. Ka kite ano, bros and girls.